Welcome to our Lunch and Learn series of webinars from the Conservation Council of New Brunswick. My name is Louise Comeau, and I direct the Conservation Council's climate change and energy work. We're doing a webinar today on the basics of climate change and how together we can make a difference. And we're doing it because I've spent a year or more on research that shows a couple of important things that we want to respond to in a caring kind of way. One is that people lack confidence in talking about climate change or engaging on the issue. We want to help respond to that and build confidence in people so they can participate in a very important social conversation. The other aspect of the climate change narrative or story or the way we hear about it is it's often presented as a technology or detailed policy piece that doesn't make any sense to somebody who doesn't work on the issue every day. And people asked for a story about climate change that reflects their lived experience. And this is my attempt to give that to you. And there will be future webinars where we'll talk a bit more detail about some of the other aspects of climate change. But for today, we're going to stick to some of the basics, and I hope you find it helpful, informative, and entertaining. The overview of the presentation is, yes, we'll cover climate impacts that we face today and how global heating is supercharging our weather. We're going to talk about the causes of climate change, things like the energy we use, the way we make, use, and throw away the products we buy, the way we treat nature, build our cities, towns, travel, and grow food. And of course, we'll talk about solutions, things that relate to what we call change at a system level, how we need to electrify pretty much everything, well, mostly. There's some key messages that I'll share with you at the front, and hopefully you'll agree when we get to the end that we have done these things. I want to have some plain talk with you on climate change about how, yes, we can make a difference together, but it has to be a real difference. We need to think local to global. Certainly, we can all do our part, but we can't do what we need to do and get to where we need to be on climate change unless governments, businesses do their part, both in Canada and around the world. And we're going to talk about opportunities. Yes, there are opportunities, but we need to move beyond recycling thinking when we think of solutions to climate change to focus more on how we make and use energy, how we grow food, and how we manage forests. So indeed, it is the case that climate is changing now here in New Brunswick. And we know that climate change is caused by us, that it's real, that it's serious, that scientists agree on these basic points, and that there's hope. We know that climate changes are already harming the most vulnerable in our society, the working poor, seniors, single mothers, to name a few, who have fewer social and financial resources to protect themselves from extreme events like heat waves or floods. And we all know someone that's been affected by spring and winter flooding on the St. John River, or storm surges and erosion on our coasts. We've seen heat waves from Bathurst to St. Andrews harming our health and crops. And of course, we've seen power outages in winter and summer, putting our safety and food at risk. From the recent record-breaking flooding along the St. John, the 2017 ice storm, Hurricanes Arthur and Dorian, to the heat waves, drought, and low river levels we saw this summer, we are feeling the effects of climate change in our communities now. We know, for example, that it's hotter. In fact, New Brunswick, like Canada's, warmed double the level of average warming globally in Canada and New Brunswick since the 1970s. We know it's hotter. We're getting more rain and more snow per precipitation event, and it's getting more unpredictable, more floods, heat waves, dry periods between extreme rain or snow events. So I'm going to spend the next few slides trying to explain to you why this is happening and how it works in as simple a way as we can. So let's start with the basic idea that we're all sensitive to changes in temperature. If it's too hot or too cold, we're just not comfortable. It's the same with the natural world. In New Brunswick and Canada, we've warmed at more than double the global rate over the last 70 years, almost 2 degrees of warming compared to about 1 degree globally. Now, this sounds like a small increase, doesn't it? But it takes a lot of heat to, a vast amount, in fact, of heat to warm the oceans, land, and air by 1 degree. Global heating is causing big changes as a result to our weather. Weather patterns are changing. We are seeing weather becoming more extreme. Hotter air absorbs more water. And this is one of the things people don't realize. As the planet's 70% water, if there's more heat, we get more moisture in the atmosphere. And that fuels more intense storms, and that releases more rainfall or snow. We know flooding's disrupting our lives and contaminating soil, heat waves of harming our health, and drought making it harder to grow food. And that's all coming from this basic physics reality. And that is that when we burn fuels, we generate carbon dioxide, methane, and nitrous oxide, primarily from burning coal, oil, and natural gas, but also from cutting and burning forests, and from industrial agriculture and changing our land, essentially cutting forests to build cities, expansion, and so on. So these kinds of changes, both in the energy we're using, but also the way we're treating the land, are adding gases to the atmosphere. Under historic conditions, when Earth was in what we call energy balance, today, we maintained a comfortable temperature of about 15 degrees Celsius average around the world. But we're no longer in energy balance. Because of rampant greenhouse gases, we're adding more greenhouse gas blankets to the surface of the Earth, and it's getting hotter. We go from cozy to overheating. And that's kind of the basic 2 ideas around climate change, that we're upsetting the Earth's energy balance, and that the gases we're adding are trapping heat at the surface of the Earth, like adding extra blankets to our bed. Time is running out on protecting the most vulnerable from climate change. And the reason is that the only way we can stop the pollution causing climate change is for all of us to work together to shrink emissions to less than half today's global levels, and in a short period of time over the next 10 years. And then we need to get to 0 emissions within the next 30. That's a lot of change, but it's worth the effort. From the work we do, I want to share with you the idea that we should do it for the love. Over the course of our research and what we know from social science is that people are motivated to care for the things they value. They're motivated to protect the things they love. And so we've been working on a project called For the Love Of, and I'm going to show you a little bit of what's on our website and that we've structured this webinar around. If I've done the technology properly, you are going to be able to hear this video. So let's just let this start, and away we go.
I love the salmon fish, and it's been a passion, I would almost say an addiction, for 45 years. It's a release, it really is, from the worries of the world, so to speak. And I love being out in the outdoors, enjoying the beauty of nature. It's my paradise here and God's cathedral.
I hope that came through for everyone. Let me just go back. So what we've done is created 13 videos, 3 per season, and a solutions video, which I hope to show you shortly. And what the idea here is to give people a sense of what they love to do. They talk in their own words, and then we explain how climate change could affect that. And we're doing that because the reality is if we don't get a handle on our energy and land use, humans and natural systems are going to face an additional warming of 3 degrees or more. And that's way over what is safe from the world, according to the world's leading climate scientists. Even global average warming of another 0.5 degree puts the world at grave risk of even more extreme changes to our weather. So let me explain again, similar to the blanket idea, which talked about the Earth's energy balance, let's talk about how that energy balance is being affected by what we do in our day-to-day lives. Think of the atmosphere like a bathtub. The fact is that the bathtub is filling up very fast, and it's filling up because of the things we do day to day. You'll see on the left, I've got emissions. We're going to talk about that a little bit more on the other slide. But essentially, to understand how much work we have to do, we're thinking of this bathtub. Think of the 2 parts of a bathtub that matter relative to the water in it. The tap right now is on full on, and we have water nearly overflowing. Essentially, greenhouse gases are of a scale in the atmosphere today that we are quite close to overflowing, essentially getting to temperature increases that are significantly unsafe. To stop the bathtub from overflowing, we have to do 2 things. We have to turn the tap off, and we have to get the water level down. So we have to get the greenhouse gases that are already in the atmosphere down to levels that are safe. And the challenge is that each year our natural systems, our oceans, our forests, our soils, and so on, are only absorbing half of the greenhouse gases we put into the air. So when people say, oh, you know, greenhouse gases have fallen a little bit, unfortunately, it's very different than it is, say, with air pollution that causes acid rain or smog. Small reductions in those can generate air quality improvements right away, like we've seen with COVID. But greenhouse gases are very different. And so because we're adding half each year from the total amount of emissions on top of the year before, we are filling the bathtub. So what can we do about that? Well, this is how we turn the tap off, and why you hear people talking about changing our energy systems. If you look on the left, you'll see that what's filling the tap are the greenhouse gases, primarily carbon dioxide, methane, and nitrous oxide from these activities I've mentioned, like the way we generate our electricity, burning coal, oil, and natural gas, the oil that we're producing and turning into gasoline for our vehicles. And those are the 2 primary sources. And then you get into the contribution that comes from the energy we use to heat and cool and run our appliances, our buildings, our industrial operations, and agriculture. So that's the sources under current conditions. So it's not a surprise that to turn off the tap, what do we need to look at? We need to look at renewable energy like solar, wind, and we have a lot of existing hydro we can rely on. We need to be more efficient so we don't waste energy, and that we want that source of non-polluting energy to be used to for our transportation, for our homes, for our buildings, for our industry. And that's kind of what I was saying when I was saying we need to electrify everything almost. But we also need to think about how we grow food and forestry. And you may have heard a new term called regenerative agriculture and forestry. And what that simply means is that we're not leaving things worse off than when we got there. We're working to make soil healthy and our crops healthy. We've got more biodiversity, and we're managing our animal waste. And you can see down in the to the right of that 3rd bullet, I note, you know, composting and recycling are really important, but relative to the rest, you can see that they are helpful, but not enough. And that's why we talk about plain talk and getting to the systems that we have to change. We also have to help nature. We are overwhelming what we call the carbon cycle. So the way that carbon moves through the system naturally through photosynthesis, we have carbon that's in the air that's absorbed by oceans and land, and it's a cycle. We're overwhelming the cycle by adding too much carbon to the atmosphere, but we're also making it weaker by damaging our oceans and soils and land systems. So this is the idea of the bathtub, where we need to widen the drain. We need a massive improvement in conservation, in protection, in biodiversity, in protecting our oceans, planting trees and so on, agriculture changes that make it more diverse. All of these things help the carbon cycle draw down what's already in the atmosphere while we're turning the tap off from the sources that are overwhelming it. If we do these things, and if we think about our local contribution to the global, we can reach the goals that I talked about in terms of cutting by half and then getting to zero. And we can do that, and the Earth's energy system, if we do our part, can come into balance. We can avoid dangerous global warming and global heating, I mean. And so we have to move beyond recycling and think about these bigger changes that actually make a material difference. Again, I'm going to spend some time now talking to you about what you can do at a household and at a community level. But I want to make the point that this is not in any way saying that anybody else shouldn't do their part. This is about all teammates on base all the time. But the fact of the matter is that it's easier for you to understand what changes governments and businesses need to make if you have some understanding of it yourself. And so I'm going to spend some time talking about that, starting with how important it is to talk about climate change. Fascinatingly, it's one of the things we don't do. Most of us are afraid to talk about climate change because we think it's confrontational or controversial. Unfortunately, what we know is that talking to friends and family about climate change, sharing our concerns, our ideas about solutions, that's how we signal to friends and family that it's an important issue. And when we take the time to listen to each other and speak from the heart about what we care about, we do find common ground. And that's very much what these videos are about, right? Start with, well, what do you love to do? What do you care about? And being empathetic and compassionate with each other about our fears and worries about these big changes, depending on what you do, what kind of work you do. This could seem very threatening. Climate Outreach is an interesting group, a very sophisticated group, I would say, out of the UK, and they've developed something called the Real Talk Model, and they do a lot of work on helping people communicate better about climate change. And just some tips here that they talk about that I thought you might find useful. Respect your conversational partner, find common ground, enjoy the conversation, ask questions, listen and show you've heard, tell your story. And yes, action makes it easier, but it doesn't fix it totally. We've got to actually come together as citizens as well as consumers. We need to learn from our conversation and keep going and keep connected to people around this. Often when we're having a conversation, I'm just as much a person who does this. We often are trying to win an argument. And if we're going to solve climate change, we've got to move beyond that. We also have the power as citizens to do something within our households. According to Statistics Canada, just under 20% of Canada's greenhouse gas emissions come from activities in the household like heating, cooling, appliances, and transportation. If we add the emissions that go with the things we buy, like food, clothes, and consumer products, household emissions in Canada are 40% of the total. So this is not insignificant. We all have a part to play. And if we add flying in, our household emissions rise even more. But let's not ignore waste. We do need to jump, as I say, jump out of the blue box. But, you know, as we know, people do think about recycling when they think about climate change. It is a place to have common ground and to connect with people and say, yeah, we do recycle, and that's good. That's great that we started that. But we need to kind of think about how we move beyond recycling and plastics concerns in our oceans. And to do that, we need to maybe connect our waste to the oil and gas issues that are behind the problem. So let's talk about plastic for a moment. They are made of oil and natural gas, and it generates about 4% of Canada's total greenhouse gas emissions. So it's not our biggest climate problem from a climate point of view, but as we know, once plastics are in the environment, they on average take more than 400 years to degrade, while leaching toxic chemicals into the natural environment, harming or killing wildlife, and contaminating land and oceans. And so it's important that we be holistic It's not climate change and nothing else. It's everything. It's that we need a new relationship with nature and with each other so that we solve multiple problems at the same time. There has to be a justice dimension to this story, and we'll come to that. Of course, we can move away from plastics as best we can, and we are all trying to do this, I know, working through buying unpackaged goods, reusing plastics, and so on. Nearly 90% of plastic in Canada is not yet recycled. This is a huge number. I know governments are working to improve that, but we've got a long way to go. So banning single-use plastics, requiring more recycling, extended producer responsibility, where the products that are produced are the responsibility of producers, are important aspects of this. Waste in landfills generate a lot of methane. If you've got food rotting and other biocarbon-based things, trees, debris rotting, you're generating methane gas. And a whopping 58% of all food produced in Canada, 35.5 million tons, is lost or wasted, according to a report. And about a third of that wasted food could be rescued and sent to communities in need across the country. So there's a lot we can do to move away from getting food tossed away and wasted. So I'm going to try and show you one more video here as we talk about food. And you might, if you see my video there, you might recognize something there.
Oh, I love gardening. Nothing takes the edge off, or let's just say the darkness of the winter, than getting your hands in the dirt. I feel like we're carrying on a tradition that's a part of New Brunswick, where people are more self-sufficient and they grow their own food. I really love gardening, not just because it's helping us be sustainable, but it's really good for your mental and physical health. You know, it's not just even being part of nature, but it's about creating beauty in the world. It's like painting artwork. It's like a painting, but you don't actually see it right away. You have to imagine it in your head, and then by fall you'll see what your art delivered.
Whoops. So I thought maybe you might want to see how it is we do it here at our little homestead. We work hard to cut food-related waste. We obviously compost. We grow a lot of food. And producing food does generate about 8% of Canada's greenhouse gas emissions from the energy and fertilizer use. And so all of us who are working to grow food organically and to use less energy in the way we grow food, that's a good thing. And there's nothing wrong with that. This is our cold room. We do try to have enough food for the winter. I think we might make it. This is our larder. I do preserve all our foods. This is a talent we have in New Brunswick. We should be proud of it. I'd really like to see us start, homesteading groups and teaching. Lots of people want to learn. I'm primarily self-taught, but we have generations of skills in our parents and grandparents, and we need to celebrate that and bring that into our everyday life. This is just a picture of our garden, which makes me the happiest person on earth. So some things that we can do. Not everyone has access to a garden. When I first moved to New Brunswick, I had a little tiny garden plot at a community garden. I loved it. And I lived in a small condo, and every aspect of my little condo, under the bed and on the shelves, I had food everywhere. So we can all do what you can, even if you're preserving 1 bottle, 2 bottles. Nobody has to go over the top like Tom and I have done here. But we can buy local and build food sovereignty in New Brunswick. And I say sovereignty in the sense of food security is a part of that. But sovereignty is about more than that. Having access to land, having access to the right to garden and grow your own food, raise chickens if you want to. We can waste less food. We can expand our food options, and we can incorporate more plant-based and fiber-rich foods into our diet. And of course, if you can, grow more food. Let's talk energy and transportation. This is the biggest area. If you're thinking about your household, your vehicle is the biggest source of your personal greenhouse gas emissions. And then after that, it's how you heat your home. And so we need to think about transportation, space heating, water heating, appliances, and lighting. But thinking about vehicles and flights, for example, they generate 22% of Canada's greenhouse gas emissions. And it's unbelievable, but you've maybe seen it in your own lifetimes that we have moved our car fleet, the national cars, all the cars on the road, 32 million, I think of them, into more of an SUV kind of vehicle. And now that has created in Canada the least efficient vehicle fleet, believe it or not, in the world. 29% of our greenhouse gases come from producing and refining the oil that goes in our cars. And so you can see why I was saying that oil and gas production plus our vehicles is about half of Canada's total. And on an annual basis, each person is driving about 2,000 we're burning about 2,000 liters, and that's generating about 5 tons per person per vehicle. We've heard lots of talk about electric and plug-in hybrids. We clearly need to go there, and we need the resources and support to help us all do that. We need more public transit, of course, but being a rural province as well, I don't want to ignore the fact that we also need vehicles that are not generating pollution. I mentioned our flights. It's quite something. We can do a lot in our personal lives, but one international flight pretty much wipes out anything we might have done at a household level. Some interesting stats. If aviation were a nation, it'd be among the top 10 global emitters. And one flight from Montreal to London uses as much carbon as a European home in a year, but certainly we wouldn't be far behind. We could easily say double, since our homes are larger and less efficient. Until on COVID, of course, the global industry was growing rapidly, 5% a year. And just on its own, tourism is 8% of global emissions. So if there's something you want to do on climate change, this is the place to start. Travel closer to home if you can, avoid flying where you can, and of course, look at options on your vehicle and other day-to-day transportation as you think about your next vehicle, or if you have access to public transit. In our homes, we can actually do a lot. We can make them more energy efficient with insulation, better windows. NB Power has a really great program. I include the link here. The Home Energy Savings Program gives you an opportunity to audit your home at a small price, $99, and develops an action plan for you. You can also look for, it's not easy, they don't always offer it, but you can look for the EnerGuide or Energy Star labels on appliances, and that will help you buy the least, the product that you want that meets your needs but uses the least amount of energy. And then, of course, we need some laws and rules and incentives, because governments need to help us in terms of accessing, whether it's solar panels, bringing more wind power. We do have net metering programs here in the province. They could be improved. They should be improved. But we definitely need laws and policies to change in the province if we're going to have affordable, reliable, and renewable sources of electricity for our homes and transportation. We also need, as I mentioned, while we're thinking about widening that drain, we need to commit to nature-based solutions. Protecting our wetlands, our forests can help with coastal erosion, flood management, absorb CO2, and just make us happy all around. And so if you do have access to opportunities to plant trees, think about those trees that you are planting. Hardwoods are going to do better, so yellow birch, maples, ironwood, things like that are going to do better in a hotter, drier situation. But protect land, love our land that we have in New Brunswick. And then finally, to talk about when we make these changes, you know, we benefit. We benefit not just financially, but we benefit from cleaner, healthier air, water, and a safer climate. And the primary thing that we need to do as a country, as a globe, and in Canada, in New Brunswick, is to invest urgently in a clean electricity system. We need to urgently protect nature and expand protected areas. We need to urgently diversify our approaches to agriculture and forestry. And we need to write a news story. The next 10 years can make all the difference, according to climate scientists. If we work together for real change, we can solve this. We can still write the story we want to tell our grandchildren and how we come together to solve the climate crisis. We can say that we did do it. We can write a letter, tell politicians how you feel, and ask for clean electricity. We've created a tool on the CCNB website that has templates for 2 letters. One is to just say how you feel. They're just templates. You can make them be whatever you want, but not everybody wants to talk about policies and technologies. And so we also have a simple, though, letter if you are open and comfortable with policy or intervening around the need for a clean electricity system. You can also do other things like your savings and investments, putting them to good green work, watching out where those go. So let me just finish up with one little video that talks about how we do our part and let you meet some of the people we interviewed for this. Whoops. So just to conclude, first of all, thank you for joining. We want to continue doing these basics webinars. So reach out both with this webinar. I really am very happy to do the presentation to your supporters, to your networks, to people who you think could benefit from a more simplified version. I hope you found it simplified. And we also want to do ongoing webinars as well that will get into some of the policy and other dynamics of electricity that, or I think electricity all the time right now, climate change. And so by all means, we'll be sharing more of those in the new year. And the goal here is to do 2 things as I started the webinar with, and that is to build confidence and to support people's participation in this story. So let me do 2 things now. I'm going to stop the recording and stop sharing so that we can spend the next 20 minutes or so in questions. And I appreciate your time and attention. Let me now stop the recording. Thank you very much.